everyone. Welcome to tnSportsChat presented by Lehigh Valley Health Network. I'm Patrick Matsinko. This is Emmett McCall. We're into the middle of July already, which means
football.
Yeah, and it's funny because I think as you kind of go around maybe on newsstands, you're starting to see some college football, NFL season previews. People are ready for it.
Yeah.
It's right around the corner. I think college football starts in maybe 50 or so days, so it's not too far off, which also means that the high school football season is right around the corner.
August 24th.
Is that the earliest that it can?
I think it is. It's about as early as it can be. Right.
So that'll be here before you know it. And with that in mind, I think we've started to kind of look back a little bit, sort of scratch the surface, thinking about what lies ahead for this season. And we've managed to come up with a little bit of our own preseason power poll.
Kind of a preseason power poll, because we haven't talked to any coaches yet. Kind of just going back off of what the teams did last year, who they lost, who they have returning, and kind of try to put together a little power poll, Times News power poll here for the show.
So we think it'll be fun. I'm certainly interested to go back, and you forget in some ways kind of what happened last year and who is back and who's gone and all that kind of stuff. But it gives us a little bit of a taste of what's to come this season. And we'll start our poll. We're gonna go bottom up. So We'll start from number 9 and work our way to number 1. Looking back at last year, thinking about kind of how it transpired. Tough season for Northern Lehigh and head coach Joe Tout and that program. That's a program that's had a lot of success.
Yeah, Joe took over for Coach Jim Tack about a little over a decade ago, and had a lot of really good playoff teams.
Oh yeah.
And they were known as a perennial Colonial League power there. But last year fell in hard times, 0-10. They were, of the 9 teams in the Times News football area, Northern Lehigh's offense was 7th out of 9. Their defense was last out of 9. Lost their leading rusher, Mason Seiler, had over 600 yards rushing. Lost their quarterback, Zach Long. So just with all those things, and I wouldn't be surprised if Joe Tout was able to turn the program around.
Yeah.
They're known for having great offense and defensive lines. Last year wasn't the case, but they were young. So, not that we'd be surprised if Northern Lehigh didn't turn it around and show a good deal of improvement, but we're starting them at number 9 in our poll here.
And you think about even maybe last year, because you always see, media poll selections when we get to the media days, thinking about the Schuylkill Football League. And look at last year, Highton was a team that wasn't pegged to do what it did.
6th out of
last
6,
year,
right, in Division 1 of the Schuylkill League.
And was this close to a district championship.
Right.
An
So
undefeated regular season, So preseason polls, even though this is...
Ours is good.
What we're doing. This is what we're doing, but they don't really mean much. But this one does.
So, right. But basically show me what you got, show it on the field. The one key returnee for Northern Lehigh, Justin Paul. He was a running back. He's going to be a senior this year. He's their leading returning skill person, 461 yards rushing last year. He scored 8 TDs. And Northern Lehigh is always known for their strong rushing game. I'm thinking he might be the workhorse for the Bulldogs next year, this coming year.
Yeah, so that's kind of where we see it, I guess, and just sort of, again, kind of doing a little bit of last year and thinking about this year. But then we move on to...
Panther Valley is our 8th rated team.
A team that was 3-7 last season. Played in a couple of close games. I mean, you think about, head coach Scott Price, first season there.
Right.
They had Lehigh, played them tough first half in that game. And then Lehigh pulled away down the stretch. Picked up a couple of wins.
They had a couple of games like that. They weren't very deep.
They were up on Marion.
Right. They were ahead of 2 or 3, 4 teams early in the game and at halftime, and just kind of didn't have that 4-quarter, athletic durability yet. Strength.
And that's the thing where now you think that maybe with head coach Scott Price, it's his second year in there, kind of has that system installed, sort of. Kids know what he expects of them, and they know what to expect from him.
Maybe a little stronger.
Sure, yeah.
Another
but
year in the weight room.
Certainly lose quite a bit, when you think about from a skill position
Right.
standpoint. They lose Hunter and Tanner Kennedy. They lose Tristan Blasco, who was, kind of, I think, a big piece there,
Right.
on the field, off the
Went
field.
to Bloomsburg, Division II football player with them, two-way player.
Tyler Baez was huge in the receiving game. They also lose John Hafer, another player that was real big for them. Rennie Figueroa, a kid
He
that
could be the wild card.
Yeah.
Coming back.
he was, he did quite a bit for them on the ground. He was a spark plug. We saw it. He was, he can be a spark plug during the basketball season, just
Right.
the way he was kind of the catalyst for that team. And obviously, if he's able to just kind of harness that through the football season, you would have to think that he's going to be someone who really can kind of provide that spark for them and be a game changer in a lot of ways.
At quarterback, they
Ethan Reese.
Ethan Reese, right, coming back. He started about the last 2 or 3 games last year for them at the end of the season. Did a nice job.
Yeah, and even thinking about coming in, he came in that Lehigh game. He saw a lot of action second half in that game. So that's a case where hopefully, if you have those pieces, kind of build around that. And again, having it be kind of the second year there for Scott Price and just sort of the whole program, and like you said, just strength conditioning, just kind of the whole program, just as an outfit. Hopefully this is a season where they can kind of just sort of take it to another level and take it forward.
One person that was supposed to be returning, their leading receiver, we're hearing rumors that he might have transferred to Jim Thorpe now.
Derek
Beckham, right. Don't know 100% that's true. We're hearing it's true though, so that'll be another key loss in addition to the losses that you've already mentioned.
Yeah, he was huge for them from a receiving standpoint, and obviously just a tremendous athlete. So
will be a nice addition to the Jim Thorpe team, which spoiler alert, they're a little further up in our poll. So we'll talk about that a little when we get to Jim Thorpe.
Yeah, kind of. They lose some, but obviously, if you're able to throw in a player like that, that's pretty massive. Next.
Number 7 in our preseason poll is Pleasant Valley. Bears have a new coach.
Matt
Kashulik's there. Was many years at Lehigh with Tom McCarroll. I think since Tom's been there, this is Tom's 4th, 5th year. Matt's been there, one of his right-hand man throughout the years, and he's going to take over the Pleasant Valley program for Mark Versick, who stepped down.
Yeah. Now, last year, you think about how we did it coming in with our preview tab. We had Brandon Keys on the cover. He had lit up pretty much every, he rewrote all the records, district records. He was phenomenal. Got off to a slow start. He suffered a season-ending injury. Enter Aiden McHugh at quarterback. And he's a kid that, through half of a season still ended up being our third, in terms of yardage, our 3rd best passer and was our quarterback of the year.
Right. And I think, what did he start? 5 games, 6 games maybe?
Yeah, he came out, I think, broke him out in West game.
Right. So did a great job, but
he is transferred.
He is transferred, so
he will not be back. So that's someone that obviously you would think the program could definitely build around.
Right.
And now you lose him, but then you also lose several other guys that were huge skill pieces last year, and Brent Beck, Mikey Brown,
who was our receiver of the year,
Brown. Samir Hoxha, and then you have a kid like Zach Altimos, who played predominantly on the line, but he also got some run in the backfield, carried the ball a couple of times. So that's a kid that was real big for them.
And all those 4 people we just mentioned were Times News either players of the year at their position or all-stars at their position. So that's a 2-8 team who lost a ton of talent. And that's kind of why we have them down at 7th in our rankings.
And the EPC is tough.
Oh, yeah. So, and the one thing we talked about, we had Brandon Keys on our cover last year, and you talked about all the yardage he threw for, but one of the things they lost the year before was they lost a lot out of their line, and that showed, they still had really good skill positions back, and as you saw, a lot of them had really good years again, but they just didn't have the same strength on the line they did the year before, and I think that's where Matt Kashuk will probably be focusing this year.
And I think you see that in just the continuity there, and I look maybe even again to Lehigh, which last year had that continuity on the line with some of those guys, with a lot of those guys, and that was a huge, it was huge for them. And you look at, they had a poster in the locker room, and that was just something that where those guys, they really took the reins. And I mean, obviously eye-popping stats and video game type numbers, but it went through those guys on the line, and they took a ton of pride in that, and just kind of made it a focus, just sort of made it a point to just make an impact, and they did. And the other thing Pleasant Valley lost too was our football player of the year from the year before, Mike Mitchell, and Justin Richardson at receiver. So last year they still had a little bit of turnover to kind of deal with. And
what Matt will have to build around this year is their leading returning skill player was Masai Moon, running back, led the team with 636 yards on the ground. So that's a good starting point for him. Get the offense. He's going to have to find a quarterback. Basically lost his 1 and 2 quarterbacks from last year with Keys getting injured and McHugh transferring. They both played, so you're looking at whoever the third string quarterback was this year. So that's going to be a key. But the last few years, Pleasant Valley's done a great job of producing quarterbacks and having a really good passing game. So we'll see who they have in the wings. You never know. Nobody expected McHugh to put up the numbers he did last year. Nobody had even heard of him. With Brandon Keys ahead of him. So maybe there is somebody there.
And that's a thing where you get an opportunity and you just try to make the most of it and see where it goes. So another team though that won't really have to worry about what it's going to be doing at the quarterback position is Northwestern. Northwestern was 4-7 last year, but return starting quarterback Devin Ballinger, who has been
one of their better players. He's only a junior, started last year as a sophomore, and he threw for over 1,300 yards. And it's kind of funny because you look, and I was looking at our stats from last year when we were talking about Northwestern, and I see like Ballinger was the 4th highest total yards for passing in our coverage area. Caleb Clymer, who they also lose, was the 2nd leading receiver in the coverage area. So he's gone, and you think
he was huge at linebacker. I mean, he was.
But you think a Northwestern team over the years, and you think you're going to be talking about the running game, and they normally have 2 or 3 of the top runners in the area because they ran that wing
and some of those guys,
and they never threw the ball. So last year they had one of the top quarterbacks, one of the top receivers. Their running game struggled a little, and that was probably the reason for the 4-7 season. Now, in a little bit of an inexperienced line coming into the season. Not the veterans. They had lost their top couple running backs. So I would think if I'm looking at Northwestern coming into this season, you got Ballinger, but I would think the one thing that they might want to try to do is get that running game back to where it's been.
Yeah, and that obviously can kind of help take the pressure off of Ballinger as well, and that way he's not always sort of the focal point, and just sort of have him be able to spread the ball around a little bit, and maybe not always have to have the ball in his hands. But Josh Snyder does a great job with those guys, and obviously he's going to have them.
And Josh was part of those Northwestern teams that threw the ball 3 or 4 times a game.
Which and he knows.
What worked, and I know he wanted some balance, and he's got a good quarterback, and he's got some receivers back, so it's just a matter of trying to get that balance, get that rushing game back to where it's been in past seasons.
So that's again, and that's the Colonial League. Sometimes seems like it kind of be up for grabs sometimes. So for a team that was 4-7 last year, you can only kind of think that they're gonna take that step forward and improve this season.
And they also have one of their leading running backs back in Jaden Allen. He rushed for 347 yards last year. He's returning. He'll be a senior, so something to build around in the ground game.
Then moving on to a team that dealt with some injuries last year that kind of shuffled the lineup, made them kind of move some guys around. Marion, which quarterback Mason Miller got hurt early in the season.
Second game of the season
against Jim Thorpe. Only had 31 pass attempts last year. that kind of forced them to.
Yeah, small schools, pretty much all high schools, very few have the luxury Pleasant Valley had last year where you have starting quarterback hurt and you bring somebody in who still throws for 300 yards a game. Right. Marion lost their starting quarterback early, had to move guys around, move Keith McCall, the wide receiver, to quarterback, so you lose your top receiver in addition to your top quarterback because now he's behind
exactly
center.
Yeah, but obviously Mason Miller back, Keith McCall back, those two guys can kind of resume sort of, I guess, business as usual at the regular positions, but thinking about the backfield though, they also returned Seth Pollock, who scored 18 total touchdowns last season.
One of the Times News All-Star, one of the top 3 or 4 running backs in the area last year.
Yeah, he was huge, almost 900 yards, rushing yards. And they also have Matt Doherty back, who is another player that was big for them in the backfield last year. And again, you think about now where you're kind of moving some guys back to maybe not so much more traditional positions, but where they are kind of best suited. And now you can and now these guys can kind of, just sort of work within sort of a different role in the offense, and maybe that fits them a little bit better. And, obviously they can kind of be, maximize a little bit more the potential that they have. So
and Marion's record last year was
they were 4-7.
4-7. We have them pick 5 in our preseason poll. A little bit on expectations with good skill people back. The key, as usual with most teams, is the line. Marion was small on the line last year. They got hurt on the line last year, and they're losing their top 2 linemen.
They lose Zach Falls, who was an all-state lineman. So and he also, he scored 2 touchdowns last year as well. So
and who else?
lose Max Nolter, who's also scored 3 touchdowns last year. So
that's their key for them.
They had a stretch though of how long where they weren't, like in terms of offensive, point producing offense, they weren't, getting that, but the defense was scoring points.
Right.
And you look at even that game against Panther Valley where they, were down and then ended up winning 40-something to 12, and what they did in the second half there.
And I believe Marion's schedule last year, if I'm not mistaken, was really front-end loaded. They played a lot of the Division I crossover type games, got off to a slow start, kind of got rolling towards the end. I think its schedule's a little more friendly this year. They don't have that stretch where they have 4 games in a row against the North Schuylkills and the bigger...
there's no major and then especially when you're dealing with injuries and you have to see those teams kind of back to back to back, it doesn't make things any easier. So
the Colts are number 5.
Now we move into that top 4.
These teams all had winning records last year, the top 4. And we only had 4 teams in our coverage area that had winning records last year. It is this group of 4. We think they're all going to be good again.
Yeah.
Some have a little bit of drop-off maybe. Some maybe even a little better than they were last year. The team we're tabbing as the number 4 in the preseason rankings was our number 1 team last year, and that's Lehigh.
Yeah. You look at just... Again, we talked about what they did last year, maybe not picked to do anything close to that, but they showed, obviously, there was such a phenomenal, ridiculously successful season that it wouldn't be surprising if they, got back to that. But they do lose the football player of the year in Cody Shear.
Right. Linebacker.
Yeah, they lose to Quan Bradley Chambers, who rushed for over 2,000 yards.
And who was their X factor last year. Part of the reason Lehigh wasn't picked as highly is because nobody knew about Taquan Bradley Chambers.
You can't just all of a sudden kind of have a 2,000+ yard rusher that's an unknown and then think, oh well, obviously that would have changed the outlook for a lot of people.
Right.
When you factor that in ahead of obviously before the season starts.
But he was a great year for them.
Oh, he was massive. Yeah, over 20 touchdowns. But then they also lose their 3rd leading rusher, Cam Chrisman, and they lose 2 big receiving threats in Colin Troxell and Nate Pettit-Claire.
And a whole bunch of talent on the offensive line.
Franz, Zimmerman, Wentz, Citro. Wentz was all state. Citro was hurt last year, but again that he was a huge leader for them.
Dane Franz was our offensive lineman of the year. I mean so they had quality linemen, and that's the thing that writers, people predicting, the finish of teams. That's something a lot of times in the preseason, the linemen are the things you don't know about as much. You kind of know the skilled people and all. And if you would have taken a closer look at Lehigh line, they were actually returning 5 before Corey Sitcho
and Gasker, Brett Gasker.
Right.
So, yeah.
So, but that's where their strength was, and as good as Cody Shearer and Taquan Bradley Chambers were last year, and they were good and got a lot of credit, that offensive line made that.
Oh,
that
yeah, that was.
Go.
I mean, that was, again. You talk about Taquan Bradley Chambers being an X factor, but those guys that was the engine.
Right.
And
we both saw them play a few times, and some of the holes that those backs got to run through, we could have ran through.
Oh yeah. I wouldn't have gone very far, but they were phenomenal. But as far as guys that are coming back, Zach Crum is coming back. Had over 500 yards receiving, 10 touchdowns. Which, I mean, he was big in a lot of spots for them last year. Think about quarterback now. Who steps into Cody Shearer's shoes? You have Chris Whiteman. 9 passing attempts last year, 71 yards. Also rushed for 82 yards.
He was a defensive back of the year. Great athlete.
Yeah.
And the year before, when Cody Shearer took over the quarterback job from Tyler Can, right? Nobody knew about
Cody Shearer.
Cody.
Yeah.
He was the same way Chris was this year. Played a couple snaps in reserve role.
Sure.
Everybody, hey, he's a good athlete. He could be okay. But then he just exploded onto the scene as a junior. Built on that as a senior. I wouldn't be surprised if Chris Whiteman has that kind of.
I think he has the same kind of potential. I mean, he's the same type of athlete.
Not to put any pressure on Chris, but he's not. He's replacing our player of the year. But he, I wouldn't be surprised if he put up great numbers in that offense. Tom McCall has a nice offense. He runs, uses the strengths of his players really well. And that's why, despite all those losses, Lehigh is still ranked 4th in our poll.
And it's hard when you look at it just on paper. But again, you think, like you said about Tom McCarroll, he does an awesome job with those guys and has them ready to go. He has them in those in positions to maximize their strengths, and he gives them a chance. And they also returned Tyler Shupp and Ben Schatz. 2 guys that were also offensive playmakers for them last year. 2
white players too.
Yeah.
They'll both be counted on to play both sides this year. So that's why we think the Indians will still be up there and be a pretty good team this year.
Yeah, certainly unknowns, but at the same time, we've seen what they can do. So it wouldn't be a surprise if they came back out and were able to kind of build on what they did last year.
Our third ranked team.
Another team that played for a district title last year, just like Lehighton, Palmerton.
Right.
Which
8-4 record.
Yeah.
Really, really good season. The Bombers kind of took a step up from where they were the year before. Now the question is, can they do it again? Can they keep building on that success and keep heading forward? We think they're going to be good. We have them 3rd ranked, and a couple of the reasons we have them ranked so high are 2 of their returning starters are really good two-way performers. Two-way all-stars last year. Jordan Nelson, wide receiver and linebacker last year, and Andrew Sabo. He was a running back and an all-star defensive lineman, which is an interesting combination, but he rushed for almost 500 yards. That's who the Bombers are going to build around this year.
And it's going to be hard to replace a guy like Takoa Gaitis, obviously, who did so much
almost
last season.
3,000 yards in total offense. Quarterback who ran the ball a lot. He was our specialist of the year, all-stater. So that is going to be hard to replace.
Kyle Kralik, who was an all-state player for them, was huge on the line, and his contributions, again, you think about what he was able to do, and maybe he didn't get a lot of the notoriety, a lot of the recognition or the praise, kind of because he didn't show up in a box score. But when it came time for all-state selections, he was recognized. His play was obviously noticed, and he was
our defensive lineman of the year.
So
that's 2 big holes. Mike Eckhart, in addition to that, he was an all-star wide receiver. He was Gaitis' go-to guy on the perimeter when he was throwing the ball. So that's 3 key losses Palmerton suffered. The good news for Palmerton is they only had 6 senior seniors on the entire roster last year. So that means they have lots of bodies coming back. They don't lose a lot. They just lost some key players.
And again, Chris Walkowiak, head coach there, has done a really, really nice job, over the years. Think about guys like Garrett Hershey, Mike Stasko, guys that have come through the program, Jared Mooney, they've come through and they've been big. And again, like we said with Tom McCarroll, he puts those guys in great spots to maximize their potential. So
and with the losses Palmerton had the year before, to go 8-4 this
which is
year,
remarkable. You look at a Hershey and a Stasko,
right, who had such great numbers, and kind of were the guiding force for that team. And when you lose two players like that, and in addition they lost a lot of perimeter players around them, you kind of think there's going to be a big drop off, and there wasn't. Palmerton went 8-4, like you said, played for a district title again. So
2 straight years against Schuylkill Haven. I mean, that's obviously that's a Haven team that's kind of run roughshod over a lot of this, the smaller, Schuylkill Football League teams. But obviously Palmerton's in a spot where, again, thinking about if guys can kind of step in and fill those voids, they have a chance to get back to another district championship game this season. So another team that I'm interested in, especially I think, is Tamaqua.
Well, we debated this. This was our big debate. We kind of were able to fill in, from 9 till 3, pretty good. But 1 and 2 was our big decision here. We have two teams.
It's the two teams. I mean, because Jim Thorpe, we talked about losing. They lose a Justin St. Hill. You lose a quarterback in Nick Roshak. You lose some of those guys that were really huge keys. Sean O'Toole is gone. Trevor Kiefer is gone. Some guys there that were really big for that Red Swarm defense, and then also contributors on offense. But
you also look at what they have coming back. Lots of key losses, but maybe even more key returnees for them this year.
And you just kind of you weigh that, the kind of the losses and the returnees, and we did the same thing with Tamaqua, where it was like, all right, you're losing, who's just been such a steady force for them in Thad Zuber, quarterback. Then you lose a Casey Rother. But you return a Nick Briner, who has been phenomenal. It seems like forever. And then you have
Braden Knobloch is back at quarterback, and he's split the times, and you've got Nate Boyle in the backfield, so you got loaded skill people, and for both teams, you got good linemen for both teams. Both had good seasons last year. Jim Thorpe is coming off a 10-2 season. Only 2 losses were to Lehigh. Tamaqua had a 6-5 season, which included 2 losses to Jim Thorpe and 1 to Lehigh.
And one of those losses to Jim Thorpe was a Hail Mary.
Probably the game of the year in the Times News area. And with these two being our top 2 teams, they're going to be playing again this year because they're both Schuylkill League Division I members.
Which is...
I think we might have a game just like last year. Crazy down to the wire, either team capable of winning finish, like they played in the regular season last year.
So that's, not to look too far ahead, but... based on last year and the fact, again, that you said about Jim Thorpe only losing those 2 games, and they were both to Lehigh and, Tamaqua.
Beat Tamaqua twice.
That's why we have Tamaqua at number 2. So, again...
We mentioned a little bit about the Raiders, but they have a loaded backfield, loaded skill people in that backfield that can go up against. I match them against any team, in the Schuylkill League, any team in our coverage area. They might have.
And you saw what they did last year, where they were able to.
As underclassmen, a lot of these kids.
Yeah.
So you just expect them to even take that next step this year. I don't know if you have some of the numbers in front of you. Braden Knobloch passed for 938 yards last year. I don't know if it was an even split, but pretty close to an even split with Thad Zuber there at that position.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers were remarkably similar. He had a few more passing yards. They were about the same with touchdowns. The other thing too is, they both had over 100 yards, just over 100 yards receiving. So they were able to get.
When they weren't behind quarterback. They were doing other things for them. You talked about Briner and Boyle. Briner had almost 1,400 yards last year. Boyle had over 660 yards last year rushing. So between the two of them, it's like 2,000 yards rushing. So
that's a nice compliment to have. And the other thing too is don't forget about, there's a Matt Kistler who had 7 receiving touchdowns. And then you have Jake Barron, another guy that can come in there. He had 21 carries last year, can be maybe another change of pace, and see sort of, how he can kind of complement that offense.
And then you got head coach Sam Bonner, who's known for having, one of the best lines year in, year out in the area. Tamaulipas was a team that's just been a rushing force for the last decade, and Coach Bonner emphasizes line play, so you expect that they're going to be good up front again as well.
Yeah, and that's where, again, just kind of looking at the potential there of a lot of those guys, they certainly seem like they're primed for, it's hard to even say a breakout season because they did so well last year, but they can definitely, looks like they can definitely take another step forward, and it wouldn't be surprising to see them in that race, for a Division I, for a Schuylkill League title down the stretch at the end of the season. So, but Jim Thorpe comes in at number 1. We mentioned that he lose a kid like a Justin St. Hill who had 29 total touchdowns, 1,500 yards rushing, 26 touchdowns rushing, and then you lose a Nick Roshak who was big for them at quarterback,
solid
a huge
player.
leader.
He did what it was asked of him.
And they split time.
They did run a little their version of the Wildcat with St. Hill being in center sometimes too. So obviously losing 2 key players from the backfield, but there's a lot of talent returning to that team.
Yeah, and you look at a kid like a C.J. Selby. He had 12 touchdowns last year, 681 yards rushing, but then they
probably
also...
a starter for just about any other team. Maybe 1 or 2 teams in the league that he wouldn't start for. Really talented athlete, played behind St. Hill, but now you look for him to have a real breakout year this year.
And you think about kids like Dominic Madera, Jaron Geisinger. Jaron Geisinger is a state qualifier, in the 100, obviously can fly. But then you turn to that defense, that Red Swarm defense, which it's been...
And I think that's the reason they're ranked number 1 is the defense. Both Tamaqua, Jim Thorpe, Lehigh and Palmerton, a lot of those teams we've talked about have a lot of skill people back, some talented skill people. But Jim Thorpe's defense was loaded last year, and they have a lot of those players back this year.
And you look at a kid like, you have Dylan Daly, who was our defensive player of the year. He's back. You look at a kid who's all-state. You have, you have a Colin Binder. You have an Ethan Mordaunt. You have so many of these kids that...
Right, and the defense only allowed like a little over 11, 12 points a game last year. They led the area in least amount of yards. They only averaged giving up 241 yards a game defensively. So, Red Swarm.
Yeah, and I know we kind of, I maybe leaned on that a little bit last year, and defense wins championships, and they did it. They did it a lot last year. They were opportunistic. They were, certainly stingy, I think would be an understatement. But, to think that they have so many of those kids back from a team that was so successful a year ago.
Right, another year of getting bigger, stronger, and more experienced in the defense.
Yeah.
So, you look at that defense and you expect big things from them this year.
Yeah, and that's their hallmark. That's what they pride themselves on, and it's obviously been extremely successful, and I wouldn't be surprised if it, kind of propelled them once again this year. So
that's a look. That's a look at our 9 football teams in the area. I'm sure, as we get closer to the start of the season, we'll be doing our previews with the coaches. We'll have a little bit more information. We'll do this poll occasionally, maybe even weekly during the season, kind of updating it, and we'll see the changes and we'll see how accurate we were here.
Come back in November and see exactly how things shook out.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun, and we hope that obviously everyone enjoyed it as well. And
welcome your comments, your criticisms.
Yeah, but yeah, again, you're kind of looking back at last year and forecasting, obviously, which I think.
And the cool thing is trying to. That once the season gets here, seeing what teams are surprises, teams that are better than everybody expected, teams that maybe because of injuries or whatever reason aren't as good as people expected. And there are so many unknowns with all these teams now.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see as the season goes on.
Yeah, so we'll see how it unfolds. It's not that far away, but for now, that's just a little bit of a taste of what's to come this fall. So
That's good.
That's all for this week. We'll come back next week and wrap up maybe a little more Little League coverage, some Connie Mack,
Right.
kind of talk about where things stand as far as our summer baseball schedule, and then we'll move on from there. But
Long fall sports will be getting started.
So for Emmett McCall, I'm Patrick Matsinko. Thank you once again for tuning in to TN Sports Chat presented by Lehigh Valley Health Network.